Hi, my name is Aaron Dotson, and I am the Director of New Business Development here at Fundriver Software. I'm going to be demoing the Fundriver solution here today. Fundriver is a web-based software as a service type application used to unitize investment pools and provide sub-accounting at the individual name fund level. This system was designed originally to replace the use of spreadsheets for purposes of tracking endowment investment pool, and since our inception in 2006, the product's morphed into more of a comprehensive solution. I'll be showing you that today in the demo. We currently have approximately 375 institutions that are using Fundriver. That's as of September of 2018. And approximately 65% of those are higher ed institutions, primarily because that was always our target market early on. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm actually logged into a demo database, and this is the landing page in the application. If you look over on the left-hand side, I call these tabs. There's 6 of them. Before I jump into one of those tabs, I just want to give a brief explanation of how we take client data and get it into Fundriver. So all of our clients would go through an implementation process where they work with an implementation specialist on the Fundriver side that helps them populate a data load template that we have and sets a soft timeline for their implementation. The data load template that we use is just an Excel file. We have a utility for loading that. So once we get that data load template back from the client, we'll have everything set up, configured, ready for the client to log in to the database, typically within 3 to 5 business days. So the turnaround time on the Fundrivers, less than a week. In terms of timing or how long it takes a client to get implemented, typically, it really just depends on the client. We've done implementations in a couple of weeks before. We've done implementations that have taken a couple of months. It really just depends on the client. So what I want to do here first is jump right into this Organize tab. So once we've loaded client information, they can come in here under Organize and search for individual name funds that are being tracked in their investment pool. And this is just a default page that'll list out 10 individual name funds. You can expand this down to 25, 50, or 100 per page. On the page, you can sort by ID number or alphabetically by name. There's also a search feature. You can search by ID number or name. When you find that individual name fund you're looking for, you just select the fund name. And this takes you to what we call a fund profile page. So the information on this page is unique to this specific fund. As I scroll down the fund profile page, there would have been a column on the data load template for each of these items that you see here. So that's how that information is mapping into this screen. Not all of these fields are required. Obviously, we have to have a name for every fund. We also have to have what we call a GLID number that stands for General Ledger ID number. Typically, that would be like the principal account number on the GL side. Doesn't have to be, though. It just needs to be a unique number. For investment pool here, I only have one investment pool set up in this demo database, but you can track multiple investment pools if you need to. I know a lot of times our clients will have like a main investment pool in which 99% of their individual name funds are participating in it. However, maybe they have a handful of separately managed, say endowment funds that have their own investment accounts. If they want to still track those in Fundriver and be able to report out on them, include them in their endowment footnote, you can just set those up in their own investment pool and still be able to track them in the system. In terms of spending rule, I'm gonna go in more detail about spending rules, and I'll show you a spending rule utility that we have that allows you to set up spending rules, set parameters, calculate what's available for spending, run a budget report, that sort of thing. So I'll be coming back and talking about that here a little bit later in the demo. This net asset classification field, this is a pretty important component of Fundriver, especially for clients that are complying with FASB reporting requirements, because you can prepare your endowment footnote out of the system. And so we'll work, with the clients and setting up their different net asset classifications, making sure that Fundriver is tracking those restriction balances properly. And then what clients are able to do, for their audit, they can just run a report and generate those footnotes. So if we go to the report tab, there's a folder here called 117.1. This is what's historically been, the endowment footnote, this net asset report here. So clients would run this over their entire fiscal year, and this will generate, the footnote for the entire fiscal year. So this is what that footnote looks like. Any report that you generate here, you can export to PDF, Excel, or Word formats, and you can also print directly from the application too. You may be aware that this reporting requirement's changing. We've already configured Fundriver to comply with the new ASU 2016-14 reporting requirements. So the footnote's going to look a little bit different in the future. So if I run this change in endowment net asset report, again, you would run this over your entire fiscal year, and it prepares that footnote for you. So clients will be able to generate both of those reports, just depending on the timing of, when they adopt the new standard. So it makes that reporting requirement a lot easier. I'm going to go back to the fund profile page. There's a couple fields here I want to talk about at the same time. The fund type, purpose use, campus, department, project code. Those fields are what I would call like group by option fields, where you can go run a report, group it by one of those fields, get subtotals. Those 5 fields can all be relabeled. You can call them whatever you want, so they're user defined. Again, none of them are required, but if you want to use those fields for purposes of grouping funds and being able to run reports and get subtotals, that's what those fields can be used for. We also have text fields available. The advancement notes field and the business office notes field, these 2 fields can be relabeled. You can call those whatever you want. These are text fields, so you can put as many characters in here as you want. As you exceed the character limit of the box, you'll get scroll bars. This purpose description field is not a required field, but if you utilize this field, this information gets placed onto one of our standard donor reports. So if I go generate a donor report for this particular fund, I'm going to go to the report tab, and in the stewardship folder, there's a report called donor report. So I'll just create a report for that specific fund. And then you'll be able to run this report for any time period that you have history. So if I select 12/31 through 2016 through 6/30/2017, that's what it'll generate the financial information for. So this is a report, this report can be customized. This can have the client logo at the top, can have footnotes down below, so all those reports look the same. And then that purpose description I showed you gets placed here under fund purpose. So this is unique to this particular fund. And then this is the financial summary information for the time period that you've run that report. Typically, if clients are using Fundriver to generate like donor or stewardship reports, they would either work off of this standard report, have us customize it the way they want it, or we can build custom reports for the client if they want to go that route as well. Again, I'm going to go back to the profile page that I was on previously. If I continue scrolling down this profile page, there's a fee schedules option here. This is we have a utility that allows you to set up and maintain fee schedules. So these would be fees outside of like normal investment expenses that would be allocated. So if you're charging like an admin fee or something like that, you can use Fundriver to administer that fee schedule. So let me show you how this works. You would go into the Organize tab and then select Fees. And this is where you set up fee schedules. You have a couple different options. You can do like a percent of market value type fee calculation. You could do like proportional allocation of a specific dollar amount, or you could do like a dollar amount per unit type allocation. For purposes of this demo, I've got a fee schedule set up here called annual Fundriver fee, where I just have it allocating a certain dollar amount. So once you've set up a fee schedule, the system doesn't assume that everyone is participating in it. So you then have to assign funds to that fee schedule. So you would go over here to Assign Schedule, select the fee schedule that you set up, and then on the left-hand side over here would be this would be a list of all of the individual named funds in the system. So if all of them were going to participate in the fee schedule, you could just select all and drop them over here. If you need to pull something out of there, you can just grab it and move it back out. And once you've done that, there's a report that you can run that'll actually show the fee, what the result of the fee calculation or allocation is. If I go to the report tab, in this other folder is a report called Projected Expense Report. And before I run this report, I have to select a post date. A post date's a closed accounting period. So if I were to select 630 here, that's just telling Fundriver when it allocates that $9,500 fee, it's going to look at 630 balances to do that. So I'm going to generate this report, and this will show me all of the funds that were assigned to that fee schedule, what fee schedule this is, and then what that allocation is of that total $9,500 that I had in there. So I haven't created any transactions or anything at this point. I've just run a report to show what the allocation will be. And then we have a utility for assessing, the fees that you need to assess. So if I go to the activity tab, there's an assess fees option here. This is where you can select the fee schedule that you want to assess. Tell it to use those fund values, as of 630. And then these expenses that are going to be incurred when I do this assessment will be showing up in my July posting period, which is my open accounting period right now in this demo database. So if I assess these fees, it says assessing of the fees successful. So if I want to see those actual transactions, I just have to go to edit transactions, and by default it'll show those very last ones that I created. So these were expenses to these funds for these amounts here in the month of July. And then just jumping ahead to my investment pool reconciliation in July, you're going to see that there's a line item in here for that fee that I just assessed. So that's part of my net cash flow reconciliation here in the month of July for this investment pool. I'm going to go back to the fund profile page. Another feature that I want to show you relates to this administrator field. We have what we call a department level access module. We designed this module with universities in mind that have different departments, department heads. What this allows an institution to do is to give someone read-only access to just a certain fund or funds that are being tracked in their database. So this can be used by other institutions. They wouldn't have to be higher ed. Let me show you how this would work. If you're using that department module, you would go into support settings and select department users. And this is where those folks get set up as users in this module. So you would first set the person up that you're going to give access to, and just to save time, I always set myself up here. So let's say Aaron is going to be one of your department users that you're going to give access to. When you set that person up, you then have to assign them access to a fund or funds. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I can do it by department, fund type, or campus, because that's the label I gave those fields in the profile page. And then I can also assign funds individually if I want to. So just for this purpose, let's just assume that this user is the Arts and Science department head. So I would select Arts and Sciences, drop it over here. So when they log into that department site, they're only going to have access to the Arts and Science department funds. So I'm going to update this. A couple other things here. If I go into access settings, the site that they're logging into, it's not the client database. It's a real-time parallel website. So this site, you can have it 4 strong passwords. You can have like your contact information in here, so these folks know who to contact if they have questions about anything they're seeing. You can even have a login screen message. I haven't got this far in the demo database yet, but if you're storing documents in Fundriver and you want to give those people access to those documents, you can do it by document category. And then if I go into the reports feature, I can give them access to any of the reports that I have available. So you basically just go through and put a check mark into the reports that you want that person to have access to. So if I select, say, this investment pool transaction summary report, I just put a check mark in it. If for some reason you would need to limit, a time period that folks can run reports, you can set a starting and ending date here. Ultimately, these people are going to have a username, password, link to the site. When they go to the site, this site's going to have the Fundriver logo on it, but it can have, the client's logo on it. So it just looks like these folks are logging into, the client site. And this is where they would put a username and a password to access the system. And once they log in, there'll be a fund summary drop down here, and this will be a listing of all of those individual funds that they've been given access to. So these were all the Arts and Science Department funds. If I select this ballet fund, I'll get like a profile page similar to what the client has in their database. And when I mention this is real time, what I mean is the information shown for the ballet fund is going to be real time in terms of the latest value that is reflected on the client side. So this is the value that I'm referring to here. So if the client were to go in and post their July activity, this site would update automatically with July values. So again, this is just a summary page of this individual fund that they've been given access to. And if they go into the reports option here, there's going to be a menu of reports they've been given access to. So if this person were to run the investment pool transaction summary report, this is like an endowment roll forward type report. So if this person runs this report, let's say just over a certain time period, only the funds that they've been given access to, or those named funds they've been given access to, would show up on this report, as opposed to the client going and running this report and every single one of their funds showing up on it. So again, this is a read-only controlled access environment, and these users would also be able to export any of these reports to PDF, Excel, or Word formats, and they would be able to print those reports. The whole idea behind this department module is just being able to provide folks with their own access, so they're not like calling the business office every month or quarter asking for it. They can just be given their own access. I'm going to go back to the profile page here. A couple other things. If I continue scrolling down, you will always be able to see the very latest value of this individual name fund as of the last closed accounting period, which we call a post date. So you can see its pooled market value, historic gift, units, and unit price for 6/30. If I go into this distribution account section, a couple things I want to point out here. There's a destination ID field here that you can populate. This would represent like the spending or income account number on the GL side that receives that individual fund spending distribution. If you have more than one spending or income account number associated with a single name fund here, instead of putting anything in this box, you could actually set it up down in this grid. And then a couple other fields here I want to mention, this reinvest threshold and authorized date fields. These are what I would call like spending rule overrides, because you can have a named fund assigned to a spending rule, but if there's a threshold set here that's not been met, then Fundriver wouldn't allow those funds to participate in the spending. So this reinvest threshold, this can be like a market value minimum that has to be met, or it can be like a historic gift or a historic dollar value minimum that has to be met before a fund's able to participate in the spending. And then you can also set a future date and time here and limit a fund from spending until that period's been met. So if you have a policy that says, we don't allow any new endowments that come into the pool to participate in spending until they've been in the pool for a year, when you're setting that fund up in Fundriver, you can just set that authorized date. The system wouldn't allow it to participate until it's been met. I'm going to continue down the profile page here to the document section. We have a document management component built into the product that allows you to attach documents in an electronic format and assign them to individual name funds in the database. If you're going to use this feature, the first thing we would have you do is go into the Organize tab and select document categories. In your database, you have to have at least one category set up, because when you upload a document, you have to assign it to a category. So I currently have 3 here. There's also an add item. I can set up as many categories as I want. And then let's say I have a document that I want to attach to the ballet fund. When you're on the profile page, you just scroll down to the document section. And if you're already storing documents, there'll be a grid here that populates with those documents listed in it. So I currently have 2 documents being stored. These can be in any format, as long as it's an electronic format, it'll let you upload and store it. This is your upload feature. This is where you can use this browse feature to go find that document that you want to upload. And I'll just grab the first thing I can find here. If you type a description in this box, it populates the description column in the grid, and this is where you assign it to a category, and then you just upload it. Again, you can store as many documents here as you want. Once these documents are uploaded, they're read-only. So if you want to store like fund agreements and that sort of thing, it's easy to do. We also have a note section here where if you want to assign an individual note to a specific name fund in the profile page, this allows you to do that. And then you could even generate a report, that listed out all of your notes by named individual name fund if you wanted to do that. So I'm going to shift gears now. I mentioned earlier that I would come back and talk about spending rules. So I'm going to go under the Organize tab. I'm going to go into spending rules. And I'll show you how this spending rule utility works. So we have some standard rules already built into Fundriver. If a client has a spending rule or rules that are not accommodated by our standard rules, we can build a custom rule for a client and put it out here in Fundriver as their spending rule. So as long as they can provide us an example of how they calculate the spending, what the parameters are, that sort of thing, typically we're able to duplicate it. What I'm going to show you here is I have two spending rules set up in this demo database. I have a blank rule that doesn't have any parameters associated with it. So, any fund assigned to this rule obviously wouldn't get a spending calculation or a spending distribution. And then I have what we call a standard endowment spending rule, what we refer to as a percent average type of rule. And in this demo database, this particular client does their spending annually. Their allocation date is 6/30. And the parameters for this particular rule that I have set here are 5% of a 12-quarter rolling market value average of the individual fund balance in the pool. We have some other options with the percent average rule where you could do like a total pool calculation or an average unit price calculation, or you can do like a fund total market value. So if you're tracking an endowment fund that's in the pool, but it's also got a non-pool component associated with it, you could have it pull in the value of that non-pooled piece as well if you want to include that in the spending calculation. Once the parameters are set for the spending rule, let's say it's that time of year when you want to calculate spending for like budgeting purposes, you can do that by running a report. So when I run this report, it's going to use 6/30 as the allocation date. That's going to tell Fundriver that 6/30 is the last period in the 12-quarter rolling market value average. So I'm going to go to the report tab, and we have a folder here called spending, and there's a report called estimated spending report. And there's going to be a column on this report called annual gross distribution, annual estimated gross distribution. It's this column right here. So what Fundriver did is it took the spending rule parameter, it applied it, and it lists out each individual named fund and what their annual spending distribution calculation is. If I go to the end of this report, you'll see this is the total down here. So this would be like the total budget amount. And then, everything above that are the individual calculations for these individual named funds. Nice thing about this report is it's got proofing capability. So if you need to proof out a calculation for someone, you can do that. So, say somebody calls and says, we don't agree with the management chair calculation. How did you come up with that? You can just generate this report, double click on the calculated amount, and the system will automatically generate a proofing report. So this report's for the management chair, shows my 5% distribution rate. These are the 12 quarters of market value for this individual fund. So this is the calculation here where it does the average value of the 12 quarters, and it applies the distribution rate to come up with the total amount for that individual fund, and then it distills it down to like a dollar amount per unit calculation. So it just allows you to proof out the calculation. And then again, this is just, I've just run like a budget report at this point. I haven't actually created any spending distributions, but we have a process built into Fundriver where you can automate the entire distribution process, and I'll show you that when I take you through a posting process here. The next thing that I want to do now is I want to just kind of walk through what we call a posting process. So this is that process of getting all of the transaction information in for a period, like gifts, distributions, that sort of thing. Also getting all the investment activity in for the period, reconciling everything from a net cash flow standpoint. I'm going to go to the Home tab here. And on the Home tab, we have a helpful link section. There's a closing process checklist here. So this is just a checklist to kind of get you from start to finish in this process. Our clients would have a dedicated support person that are going to be showing them how to do this until they're able to do it on their own. In the example that I'm going to be showing you here, this is just an example of a client that does everything on a monthly basis in Fundriver. They just finished fiscal year in 6/30, so they're now in the month of July. If I follow the checklist step by step, the very first thing would be to add any new funds. So if you receive new money that came into the pool, for a brand new fund, that's the first thing you would want to do is go set that fund up. And these are just hyperlinks to take you where you need to go to do each of those functions. And then there's detailed instructions for each of these steps too. So if you click here for online instructions, this will pull an article from the help section of the Fundriver knowledge base. And it'll just explain how to do each task with screenshots. So it's pretty intuitive. It's pretty easy to use. So let me go back here. I'm going to skip step number 1, assume we don't have any new funds. I'm going to go right into step number 2, which is make income distributions, call these spending distributions. So I wanted to show how the spending process could be automated if you would want to do that. You don't have to. When we work with new clients, once we understand how they're processing things on the spending side, we'll show them the easiest way in Fundriver to do it. But I just wanted to show how that could be automated. So I'm going to go in here under make income distributions. And I'm going to have Fundriver create spending distributions here in the month of July. So this client, they do this once a year, they do it annually, and they do it in the month of July. So what will happen here when I have it create the spending distributions, it'll take the spending rule parameters and apply them, and it'll create those distributions for those amounts that we calculated on the estimated spending report. So when I go to do this, I have to make sure I tell it to use the fund values as of 6/30. So it knows that 6/30 here is the last period in my 12-quarter rolling market value average when it creates these distributions. And again, these transactions are going to occur in July. So it'll process and tell you that distribution was successful. If I want to see those transactions similar to the fee schedule that I assessed, I can just go over here to edit transactions. And because I have multiple types of transactions in here for July, I can filter this just by date range if I want to, or by transaction type. So if I just want to see the distributions, I can select distribution and then load those up. And this shows the distribution transactions that were just created here in the month of July for those individual amounts, to these individual funds. So I just automated that whole annual process here in the month of July. If I go look at that investment pool reconciliation again, after generating those spending distributions, you're going to see there's a line item in here now for the spending distribution. So I'll get to this a little bit later in the posting, but if the distribution, if that cash doesn't physically come out of the investment account statements in July, it'll be a reconciling item that I have to deal with. And we'll get to that when we go to step number 4 in this process. So I'm going to go back to the checklist, which gets me to step number 3, which is to enter gifts and other transactions. So this is where I need to get my transaction activity in for the month of July. Typically, you're bringing in like gifts. You have 3 ways to input transactions. There's a manual option, which is the default here, this transaction entry page. So let's just say I only had 1 gift to enter in the month of July. I could easily come in here and do that manually. I could just select gift as the transaction type, put in the amount of the gift. Let's say it was for $5,000, and then we have to apply it to a fund. So let's just say it's going to the annual fund. You can put a note in here. This note becomes a permanent record associated with the transaction, and then you just hit save. So that's how you can manually enter a transaction in Fundriver, and we have different transaction types just depending upon what you're trying to do. Second option that we have, and we have quite a few clients that use this method, we call it copy from Excel. This allows you to copy and paste from a worksheet into a transaction table. So on my desktop here, I have a worksheet that's got 7 gift transactions in it. And I just have the worksheet in a 3-column format where it's got ID number and amount. Really, you only need 2 columns. I've got a 3rd column that just has a note in it that says July gift. And then all you have to do is just copy the data. And then when you come back into Fundriver, you have to paste the transactions in by their transaction type. So these were all gifts, so I'll need to make sure I select gift. And then when I hit the paste button, I'll get a control V message. As soon as I control V this, it drops into a transaction table. So now if I wanted to do distributions or transfers or, an expense or something like that, it works the same way. You just need to make sure you correct, that you're selecting the right transaction type from the dropdown. So that's the second method of entering transactions. I'm going to clear these out because I'm going to go to the third method and show you how this works. It's a GL import. So this is a process of importing a file with the transaction activity in it. And this can be done one of a couple ways. We have a standard import file that clients can use that we already have an import built for. Or we can build an import for a file from your general ledger system. So let's say you're a Banner client. You can create a GIF file in Banner. We'll configure Fundriver to accept that file format. So what you would need to do is, and when you're ready to upload those transactions, you just go to GL import, select the import that we'll have built, and then you'll just use this browse feature to go grab that file that you want to upload. So I'm just going to be grabbing this file that just has 7 gift records in it. And it'll take each of those records and try to commit them to the database. So if there's a problem with something here, it'll hang up on me. So I've got total records in the file 7, total records processed 6, and one of them didn't come in. So if I look down at this table, it'll show me that there was no matching endowment found for this record. That's a pretty common error description if you're doing like an import from a GL system, because maybe you're importing a gift to a fund that you forgot to set up or something like that. If that's the case, then you can still go set the fund up. Once you set it up, you can come back to this page. That record will still be out here and you just have to reprocess it. If maybe you just had the wrong ID number, which is what's going on here, this ID number shouldn't have an X at the end of it. So all you'd have to do is just edit it right here on the screen, take the X off of it. And then once you've corrected it, you can just go ahead and reprocess that record and it'll commit it to the database. So that's how you can get your transaction activity into the system. Again, if I just brought in those gift records, those 7, and then I input one manually. If I wanted to see those transactions, again, you just go to edit transactions, and I could just tell it, I want to see the gift transactions. And the ones here that I can still edit or delete, that's because I'm still in an open accounting period. These are the ones that I've just input. And just like the expense that I allocated, and then the distribution that I ran, if I go back to my pool reconciliation here in July, you're going to see that there's a line item in here now for that gift activity that I brought in. So it becomes part of the net cash flow reconciliation. So that's how you get your transaction activity in. I'm going to go back to the checklist again. This gets us to step number 4, which is to post and reconcile investment activity. So this is where I get my investment activity in for the period. So there's 2 ways that this can be done. You can do everything in total at the investment pool level. So if you're going to do that, obviously I have this preloaded, but if you're going to do everything in total at the pool level, you have these 5 items of investment activity to input here. So this pool may have 20 different managers, but this is the total ending market value of all 20. This is total interest and dividends of all 20. So this is one option. The other option is we have what we call an investment portfolio module. And the difference is, instead of inputting the investment activity in total at the pool level, it's done by investment manager account. So this module is typically beneficial for those institutions that are doing like manager reconciliations on spreadsheets. It just allows you to put that whole process in Fundriver. So let me show you how that works. So if we're using the investment portfolio module, when Fundriver does the implementation, not only would they be setting up the individual named funds in the investment pool, but they would also be setting up the investment accounts that make up that investment pool. And if we're using that investment portfolio module, you would go under investment portfolio here. And this is where you could see those investment accounts that are assigned to the investment pool. So if I select my endowment investment pool here, there's going to be a listing of accounts that make up that pool. So if I select the alternative hedge fund account, this is like a profile page for that account. I can set up an investment type. You can add your own investment types. We have some defaults. You can also set up an asset class. You can assign a FASB level 1, 2, or 3 to each of those accounts. And I'll show you some reporting that kind of ties back to that. So The big difference here is obviously in the input of the investment activity. So, you know, again, this investment portfolio module is usually beneficial for those institutions that are doing like account reconciliations manually, you know, on like a spreadsheet or something. It just allows you to put that whole process into Fundriver. So the idea wouldn't be to still do it, you know, outside of Fundriver and also do it in Fundriver. It'd be to eliminate what you're doing outside of Fundriver, allow you to just come in here and do it. So when I select my endowment investment pool now, I have a manager data entry tab. And this drop down shows all of those accounts that make up my pool. So I would take my July alternative hedge fund statement and I would enter information directly off the statement in here. So, you know, if there was money that came into this alternative hedge fund account, there would be a positive net cash flow here. If money was withdrawn, you know, there would be a negative net cash flow here. Once you've input the manager information, you just save it, and this does a net cash flow reconciliation for this account. So if it doesn't reconcile, there's going to be a difference here. You know, once you've reconciled that account, you just go down the list one by one, and as you populate this information, it rolls up to the total pool level here. When you're using the investment portfolio module, you also have another folder of reports available here that are found under this portfolio level reports. One of these reports is, we call it manager reconciliation report. So this is like your manager roll forward reporting. So you could run this just for the month you're working in, you know, to see what you've input and if everything reconciles. So I'll just run this for July. So, or you could run this over your entire fiscal year, you know, for like your audit. So this is that reconciliation report for July, shows the activity for each of those accounts. If they don't reconcile, you know, there'll be a difference over here. One thing I want to point out here, you'll notice for the month of July, there was no money that came in or out of any of these investment accounts. And I want to point that out because if I look at the bottom left-hand side of this report, this shows the pool reconciliation. So my net cash flow by managers is 0 because no money came in or went out. However, I ran a distribution in Fundriver. I allocated an expense, you know, a fee schedule, and then I had some gifts that came in. So my pool doesn't reconcile even though my managers do. So we'll have to deal with that here. So let me go back to the investment activity screen. I'll go ahead and finish this posting out as if we're actually using the investment portfolio module. Once you've got all of your managers reconciled, you have to come over here to the post tab and reconcile your pool. So this is my investment pool reconciliation for the month of July. So it's got my beginning market value, shows the distribution that I ran, the fee schedule that I allocated, the gifts that came in, and then starting with income, that's just the total of all the investment activity. As you can see, this pool doesn't reconcile. It's showing me that 835, 264.55 needs to come out of the investment pool in order for the actual investment statements to tie back to the activity in Fundriver. So again, I have a difference here because it's basically just the net of these three transaction types up here because there was no money that went into the pool or came out of the pool. So again, it's just showing me this needs to come out. So I can't actually close this period. You know, if I tried to close the period, it won't let me because the investment pool doesn't reconcile. So I have an additional step to take here. We've got to reconcile this. What's going on here again? This is just a net cash flow issue, timing issue with cash flow, basically. I call it a do from issue. If you're using the investment portfolio module, we would have a do from manager account set up for this entry. If you're not using the investment portfolio module, we would have a do from fund set up and assigned to your investment pool for this entry. So again, I'm just going to finish this posting out as if we're using the investment portfolio module. And all you would have to do is just copy the amount in its entirety here on your screen. And if I go back to manager data entry, you may have noticed there's a do from investment pool here, manager setup. And if I look at the reconciliation for this account, you'll notice there's no beginning value. So this is like my very first entry. So I'm just going to paste in that amount to the ending market value, save it. You'll notice I'm still off. It's because I also need to place that into the net cash flow box here in July. So once I do that, the do from manager account is reconciled to 0. If I go back to the post tab and do the pool reconciliation, you'll see it now reconciles to 0. So again, the whole point of that entry is so you can tie your actual investment statements and the activity on those statements back to Fundriver and the activity that you've input in Fundriver. So when fiscal year end rolls around, your auditors pull your investment statements, they're tallying everything up. You can provide them with the fiscal year end reporting out of Fundriver. Everything's going to match to the penny. Because you've had to reconcile things from a net cash flow standpoint. Once you're reconciled to zero, you can close this period. When I close this period, this is when Fundriver is going to do the buying and selling of units. This system is a unitized accounting system, and it'll also allocate the investment activity based on each individual named fund's ownership of the pool. So, it's based on units at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and close this period. It'll do all of that processing. So it says 7/31 posted successfully, and you'll notice it rolled me into the month of August. So it's typically at this part of the process where a client would go into GL export, and this is where we can configure Fundriver to create a file or files with that activity and those journal entries that you want to pull back to the GL to update balances. So, if you're tracking individual named funds on the GL side, you would typically have like an investment activity export that you create that has those journal entries that you then upload back to the GL to update balances. If you run a distribution, you might have a distribution export, or maybe you have a fee schedule that you assessed. You could have an expense export, that sort of thing. So we configure these exports for you on the Fundriver side, and they'll be available. All you'd have to do is go out here and create the export file that you need. It'll create the file in the format that you need it in, and then you just upload it to the GL. So this posting process that I just took you through, it's ensuring that your investment statements tie back to Fundriver, which ties back to the GL. And there's a couple different ways clients use Fundriver. Some use the system strictly as the subsidiary ledger, where they're maintaining all that individual activity in Fundriver, and they're just pulling back a single entry back to the GL. Some institutions have all of their individual funds set up in the GL side, so they'll pull all that activity by individual name fund back to the GL. If I were to go back to the posting process checklist, there was a step number 5 here, which is to report results. This just takes us to the reporting tab. Before I actually do that, there's a couple other features that I want to make sure I cover here in the demo. This award recipients tab here, we have a module that we call award recipient module. And the purpose of this module isn't meant to be like a replacement for what would be used on like the financial aid side. This isn't like an academic works type of product. It was more to have a placeholder for scholarship recipient award detail. We had a lot of clients that were asking to be able to place that type of information onto like a donor or stewardship report. And so that's what kind of drove the development of that module. And so what you're able to do, I'll just give you kind of a high level overview here. You can go in and create things manually. Like if you wanted to set up an award or create an award manually, you can do that here. You can also set up recipients manually. In lieu of doing anything manual, we have a process where you can download a setup template, and I've got that template already on my desktop here that I can show you. So it's just an Excel file that you download, and if you look at row 1 at these column headings, these are a field, the fields that are available for populating, and you'll notice there's a couple user-defined fields here. And so clients will populate this template with the detail that they want to upload into Fundriver, and we have an import built for that already. And they'll just, if I go into the activity tab under transaction entry and I go back to that GL import section, there's an import built for that file that they can populate. So clients will typically at least annually populate that file, upload it into Fundriver, and then any of that information that they've uploaded can now be pulled onto like a donor or stewardship report. There's also just a standard report that they can run that'll show that information that they've uploaded. You can also do a search here. If you didn't want to run a report, you just want to search by named fund or by recipient, I could go in here and select, ballet fund, and it'll show me, the high level detail like first and last name, the amount of the award, the award date, the award type, that sort of thing. So again, this was really created to have like a placeholder for that type of information so that it could be reported out on, or even placed onto like a donor or stewardship report if you wanted to. And then, so that's the award recipient module that I wanted to make sure I reviewed. And then also we have a new module that we call non-pooled funds. And the purpose of this non-pooled funds module is to be able to track fund balances for individual named funds that are not in the, they're not invested in the investment pool. They're not invested in their own investment account. They're say, it would be like tracking like expendable fund balances. So if you wanted to track the balances of the endowment appropriation, the amount that's been appropriated for spending, it's left the investment pool and it's sitting out there waiting to be awarded. That's really what this module was designed for originally, was being able to track expendable fund balances. Really, you can track any fund balances that aren't in the investment pool. So we have transaction types that you can use to increase and decrease those balances, and then you can pull those non-pooled fund values onto reports. And just to kind of give you an idea, in this demo database that I use, I have all of my endowment funds set up with corresponding non-pooled funds, which are basically expendable funds. So these are the fund balances of the endowment appropriation. So if I were to select, like the ballet fund here, expendable, I'll have, similar type of profile page that I have for the endowment fund, and then, that shows the balance down here. If I were to go to the funds tab and look at the actual ballet fund again, you may have noticed this earlier, but if I scroll down to the values, you'll see it shows that ballet fund expendable. So if you're using Fundriver to track those expendable fund balances, we have some automation built into the product where, if you run your endowment spending distribution, not only will it create the spending distribution, but it'll also create a corresponding revenue transaction, to your expendable fund balances. So, that's what that non-pooled funds module was designed for. It's designed to track the balance of funds that are not invested in your investment pool. So you're really just tracking a dollar value. You're not doing like an allocation of any investment activity to those funds or anything. You're just tracking the balance of a fund that is not in the investment pool. So now I'm going to go to the report tab. We have about 45 standard reports built into Fundriver. We also have what we call a user-defined reporting tool that allows you to create your own reports. Let's just go through a couple of these reports. If I go into the summary folder and I run this investment pool transaction summary report, this is like an endowment roll forward report. So it's a date range report you could run. You could run this over your entire fiscal year for your audit if you wanted to. If I just run this for July, I want to do a group by just to show you how this works. If I say I wanted to run this report and group it by department, it'll break it out by department, and I'll have subtotals by department. So again, I ran this July 1, July 31. This is going to show us, this is a roll forward. So these are the individual named funds here. Their beginning balances, shows the allocation of the investment activity that I had input for July, the transaction activity that came in. So add these columns across here, I end up with my ending value. Again, I grouped it by department, so I've got subtotals for those departments. And then if I go to the last page, here are the grand totals. If I wanted to run, say, a report that showed which funds were underwater at some point in time, there's an underwater funds report here. You run this as of one date and time. What's going on is it's just doing a market value to historic gift comparison. And if it's underwater where its market value is below its historic gift, it just pulls it onto a report here. It shows that underwater amount. If I need to go back and look at an investment pool reconciliation, for some time period, there's a There's an investment pool reconciliation report here. If I want to go back and look at my July reconciliation, I'm able to do that. If I want to run a report, say see what the gifts were over a specific time period, you can run this historic gift report, and I'll run this over say 12/31/15 through 7/31/17. This will show by individual named funds the beginning historic gift balance for those funds, any gift activity that came in over that time period, and then those ending historic gift balances here. Again, this is a unitized accounting system. If you want to run a report to see units and unit values for certain time periods, there's a couple different reports you can do that with. The unit market value worksheet, you run it as of one date and time. The unit market value report is a date range report. If I run the unit market value worksheet, let's say for July, I'm only tracking one investment pool here, so you'll notice that all the individual funds share the same unit price in the pool as of July 31. It's just their unit balances that are different, and then units times unit price give you market value. We also have audit trail reports, pretty much tracking everything here. If somebody reopens a period and makes a deletion or edits a transaction, there's a report that you can run that'll show who did it, when it was done. Everything's tracked by user login ID, time and date stamped. Somebody changes a spending rule parameter, there's a report you can run. Somebody goes into the profile page, changes something on the profile page, there's a report you can run. So everything's being tracked here. You can always go back and see who did what. We also have a feature that you can utilize. Instead of thumbing through 45 some reports every period, trying to remember which reports you liked and which ones you want to run, when you find the report that you want to run, you can tag it here as frequently used, and the system automatically creates a frequently used folder and puts that report in there. So you can just close your period, go right to your frequently used folder, and there's that report. We also have what we call a user-defined reporting tool. This is a tool that allows you to create your own reports, and this has a lot of functionality. Just to kind of give you an idea how this works, we have what we call data sources, and these data sources contain items that you can pull onto a report. So if I wanted to create something here real quick, I'll just select activity summary as my data source, and once I do that, I can go in and select the fields that I want to pull onto this report. So you have the option here, you can delete them all and just add one field at a time back. Or for this purpose, I'm just going to leave everything on here just to kind of show you the capability of this. And then you can also do sorting and grouping, set filters and that sort of thing. Once you've determined what you want to pull onto the report, the last thing you have to do before you actually create this report is you have to name it. So you have to give the report a name. So I'm just going to put sample report in here. And then you can put this in different formats. You can do page breaking. You can pull a logo onto the report, that sort of thing. Before I'm able to publish the report, I have to make sure I place it into one of my report categories. So I could stick this in any category that I had. I typically would recommend that if you build a report on your own, that you put it in the user-defined folder. That way you know where it's at specifically. You don't have to go looking for it. So I'm going to put it under user-defined, and then I'm just going to publish this report. When I'm publishing the report, I'm making it available for viewing. So it says report has been successfully published. So this is where I can go under the report tab, select view reports, and I know that I saved it in the user-defined folder. So here's that sample report that I created, and I'd be able to run this report for any time period now. There's going to be a lot of information on this report because I didn't take anything off. I pulled every one of those items onto this report just so I could kind of give you an idea of the capabilities here. As this report's generating, a couple other things. You have the option of of relabeling things. So if I want to rename some of the column headings, you can do that. You can change column orders. If I wanted to set a filter that only pulled in individual funds whose balances were, say, over 50,000, you're able to do that. So there's a lot of functionality with it. Again, this report took a little longer to generate just because I had so many items on it that it was pulling in. But I could pretty much pull whatever I want to onto this single report. So just to give you an idea of the capabilities of that tool. Moving on here, I'm going to go to the support settings tab. You're going to have a dedicated support person that's going to help you, train you on the system, show you where all the support tools are, get you familiar with the Fundriver knowledge base that we have, all of our users have access to. If you can't get a hold of your support person, you have questions about something, you have other options. Maybe your support person's out sick, they're on vacation, you just need help with something. You can go in here under support settings, select online help. You have some options here. You can send an email to Fundriver support. We have a support number you can call. Our hours are between 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You may have noticed there's a support button here on all of our web pages. This allows you to set up a ticket. We have a ticketing system. So you can submit a support ticket, and one of our support people will pick that ticket up and then communicate with you, directly through that ticket number via email. So you have some other options there. There's also some tools here available. We have a common tasks section here. This is just a really short list of most frequently asked support questions, and these are just hyperlinks to take you where you need to go. And then, if you don't know what to do when you get there, you can pull up the instructions. These pull directly from the help section in the Fundriver knowledge base. Earlier in the demo, I mentioned the ability to set up as many users as you want. If when we do an implementation, we'll set up your initial users for you, but someone on your side would need to be like an administrator, where you can come in here and set up your users yourself. You can change and reset passwords. You can disable users. When you're setting up a new user, you have to assign a user type to that person. We have 4 standard user types. We have client administrator, client user, report only, and read only. The only difference between a client administrator and a client user is the administrator is the one that can come in and set up new users, change and reset passwords, disable users. That's really the only difference there. And then if you wanted to give somebody report-only access, when they log into Fundriver, they only have access to the reporting tab, and they're only able to run reports. If you wanted to give somebody read-only access, you can also do that. That allows them to navigate throughout the system. They can see everything. They can still go run a report. They just don't have any ability to add something, delete something, process anything. It's truly a read-only type of access level. And then we also have a tool, we call it Role Manager. This is a tool that allows you to create your own user types in Fundriver. So, for example, if maybe there's a student in the business office that's working, and you want them to just be able to upload, documents or that sort of thing, you could create a user type that place that type of limitation on that user. So with that, I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to show today in the demo. Just to kind of give you an idea on pricing of the product, we currently offer a base solution that has an annual fee of $7,000, and then we do offer reduced pricing for institutions that are under 50 million. But in addition to the Fundriver solution, we have add-on modules. So it's kind of like an a la carte fee schedule where you can pick and choose the features that you want, and then those features can be added at any time. And so that's how that fee schedule works. If anybody has any specific questions about pricing, any questions about the product, feel free to reach out to me. If you go to www.fundriver.com, my contact information is on the main site, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, provide a personal demo for you, talk about functionality and how you could use the system to handle, the different tasks that you're currently dealing with. So I'd be happy to do that. My email address is adotson@fundriver.com, and my phone number is area code 513-618-8718, and I'm at extension 1004. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close the demo out for the day. Thank you.